Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I am your host, Alan Moore, and I am so honored that you have taken the time to join us today. There are so many podcasts out there, and you have decided to listen in to XYPN Radio, so thank you so much for that. Today's episode is an interview with Daniel Wrenne, who is the founder of Wrenne Financial Planning. So Daniel has a really interesting story since he was building a pretty solid book of business at Northwestern Mutual before ultimately deciding to branch off and start his own firm. So this episode really highlights what it took to make that transition and honestly some of his successes and failures along the way. So if you're with an insurance company or wirehouse and you're wondering what your options are for going fee only and starting an RIA and what that whole process looks like, then this episode is definitely for you. Now, the show notes, as always, can be found at xyplanningnetwork.com/14. This month's shows are brought to you by BettermentInstitutional.com, the advisor-branded digital platform that automates the operational side of your business and lets you do what you do best, advise clients. Schedule a demo at www.bettermentinstitutional.com, and you can also listen to our interview with Steve Lokshin, the co-founder of Betterment Institutional and the platform's first advisor client at www.xyplanningnetwork.com/16. All right, let's go ahead and kick this episode off with Daniel Wrenne. Hey, Daniel, welcome to XYPN Radio. Thanks so much for being on with us today, man.
I appreciate you having me.
So we have Daniel Wrenne, not Reen, not Renee. It is Wrenne, who is the founder of Wrenne Financial Planning. And you just have an awesome story. And so when did you write the article for the Kitsis blog?
I started on it probably about 3 months ago or so. And actually, before I got started on it, I emailed Michael and I said, hey, I got an idea for, this general type of article. Before I spend all this time on it, what do you think about it? So that was all about 3 or 4 months ago.
Okay, I'm trying to think when it actually went live. We'll post a link to it in the show notes. But it's a really good review of some of your transitions, some of your career. So ever since I read that, we knew we were launching XYPN Radio. I knew I wanted to have you on as quickly as possible because you just have a really compelling story that I think a lot of folks will connect to, honestly. So let's just start back to the beginning. How did you discover the career of financial planning? How did you get your start?
I was always interested in finances and how that works. Originally, I started out just graduating from college. I went to University of Florida. So I got towards the end of that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
We're going to have to end this. We're going to have to end this recording early as a Georgia grad myself. So thank you so much for being on the show.
To Georgia?
I did. I'm a dog, man.
No, we can't talk anymore.
We are done. All right.
That's crazy.
This was the shortest podcast episode for XYPN Radio. Great job.
Yeah.
All right, we can put aside, you can take your jean shorts off for just a minute and we will, we will get, anybody in the SEC knows that's a good joke.
That's the deal.
All right. Anyway, sorry, you're at Florida and.
Yeah. So getting done, I'm like, what am I going to do with my life? And I had a general idea that I wanted to be involved in money. And particularly I enjoyed helping people with money related stuff. I enjoyed investing and stuff like that. And so I started going to career fairs and I hooked up with some of the different firms and at that point, I guess I was talking to the different wirehouses and insurance companies basically and discovered I thought that what I wanted to do was just financial advising is what the title was, but it seemed like there were so many different jobs available for that. And it was a combination of wanting to get in the financial related field and the fact that I enjoyed helping people with money. I had some experience, my own experience in investing, and going to these career fairs and talking to people is like, okay, of all the different booths I've gone to, I think this whole financial planning idea makes sense because you're kind of pairing all that together. It's like it's a career where you can essentially help people with money. And I like that idea.
So it just sounded like a fun career path, basically. So I never actually went to any of those big career fairs, but I do understand that the wirehouses always maintain a pretty strong presence there. So which wirehouse or company did you actually end up starting your career with?
I started with Northwestern Mutual. I talked to pretty much all of them, but I started with Northwestern Mutual, the big insurance firm. I guess that was 2005.
What was it about them over probably, the dozen other companies that you were talking to that attracted you to work in there?
They were the least salesy of all of the different firms that I talked to.
Fair enough.
They weren't zero sales, but they were the least salesy. That was the first thing. And second thing is I have a grandpa that's in the insurance business in Nashville. And he said, of all the companies you just told me you talked to, that one's the best. So
all right,
those two things.
Okay. So Northwestern Mutual kind of kicked things off. For those of us who never went the wirehouse route or the insurance sales route, like what does life look like inside of Northwestern Mutual? Just try to describe it for those of us that have never worked there.
Yeah. So I was convinced I was going the direction of financial planning, financial advising. And to me, that made sense. Now, when I started, it didn't exactly go that direction. It started out with just sales training. It was like, how do you get in front of people, basically? So that combined with who is your contact base? What does your existing relationship, contact base look like? So they basically help you pair the two of those together. It's like, who do you know and how are you going to get connected to them and get connected to more people? Basically, how do you get in front of enough people so that you can do what you need to do to build a business? That was the absolute focus when we started.
And was the sales training pretty good? I mean, do you still use some of the techniques and tactics you were taught at that point?
Yeah, there's definitely stuff I use. A lot of it I don't use, but yeah, there was a lot of good sales training that I learned early on. It got to the point where that's the thing with sales is if you get really good at it, you almost have to be careful with it because you can kind of get people to do whatever if you're really good at it.
Yeah, it can be a little manipulative if you're too good at it. Understood.
Right.
So, and honestly, it's an area where folks that have been listening to some of our episodes, you'll hear Michael and I talking about the difference between sales and marketing. And it's hard to get good sales training. I mean, and I do see, we'll talk more about this, but I do see that folks coming out of the wirehouse world that have been through some of these very, very expensive sales training programs that they have spent millions of dollars developing, they actually get some cool like tools and tactics and probably some stuff that they'd rather leave behind and wish they didn't know. But, it's a crucial part of running a business. You got to be able to sell what you're selling. You got to be able to communicate that value to clients. So you got started with Northwestern Mutual, going through the sales training. They have pretty high turnover, I think. So what did that career look like inside of Northwestern Mutual for you?
It was, like you described, very high turnover. I didn't realize that early on. It was just kind of, I made my mind up that I was going to give it a go and make it work. But yeah, lots of turnover, very, very, very difficult. And I understood why there was a lot of turnover just based on the fact it was so challenging to get up and going. I think their lowest retention rate is with college grads, straight out of college, but no internship, which is what I was. So I think my retention rate in my group was like 6% or something. So,
oh my goodness. 6%, 94% didn't last how long? Just a couple of years probably?
Yeah, I don't know what the timeline is.
Man. Oh, okay. Yes. So cool. And it's just a different world. Again, I grew up in kind of the family world, so I never worked at a firm larger than 5 advisors. So it's just a different.
There was a lot of good people that I saw go through the program. I mean, I was riding with a buddy once and we counted up. He started when I did and we stayed we were there 9 years together and we counted up how many people had come and gone in just our specific little office while we were there. And it was something like 40 people. And all of them are really, a lot of them are just really good people going through there that just didn't work for them.
Okay. So did you see, and this is just totally anecdotal, but did you see them leaving the profession of financial planning or did you see them kind of shifting into a different role that was a better fit?
Most of them left the profession.
I was really hoping that was not going to be your answer.
No, a lot of them wanted to be in financial planning for the same reasons I originally wanted to be in it. They wanted to help people with money. And they realized that you had to master the whole sales thing. It was 90% sales and 10% financial planning. And they didn't like that.
Yeah. I mean, and I'll admit that, part of our mission with this, with XYPN Radio, with just XYPN Network in general, is just to try to capture some of those folks that have been burned. They're not seeing the profession side, they're seeing the sales side, thinking like, I want to help people with financial planning. And then they get in these bad jobs and there are bad jobs in fee only as well. Don't get me wrong. But you get into this bad job and then we lose them. And, we lose great talent. And I think that's why we're not growing the pool of financial planners, because we just have so many getting churned out. But
yep.
So you're at Northwestern Mutual 9 years. So what does the progression look like while you're there? So you kind of come in on all you're doing is training. I mean, do you become a financial advisor with your own book at some point? Kind of what's the career path?
You start out with 0 clients. You make 0 income. What you make is directly contingent on how many clients you get or what you sell, essentially. So I started out with 0 income as a college grad, 0 clients, 0. They don't give you clients. If they do give you clients, actually they do give you clients, but you don't earn any revenue off of them. They call them orphan clients. So they're clients from other people that had left the business. So, that's a little bit of help. But yeah, it's straight up eat what you kill.
Gotcha. So you just kind of grew your own book and got to a point to where basically you had, a client base of how many? Right.
So I think my first year I got maybe 30 clients. And on average over the course of the 9 years, I would probably average maybe 45 or 50 clients a year, new clients a year. So I had a lot of clients when I left. A lot of them, though, were transactional clients. So I wouldn't call them financial planning clients necessarily. But you got your guy that just needs to get some sort of insurance and that's it. So that all mixed in there. So when I left, I think I would say around 300 or 400 clients.
Okay. Which is I think that's pretty standard for successful folks in that world. So
right.
I started my business in Milwaukee, which is Northwestern Mutual's headquarters. I knew many a Northwestern Mutual sales folks. I'm trying to remember. Yep. They had just a crazy.
I think the magic number for them is 1,000.
Whoa.
Striving for 1,000 clients. And it's just such a different world. You're going for, quantity like crazy. And there's no way to service that number with doing financial planning.
No, you just can't. You can write 1,000 insurance policies over the course of 10 years, but even that's a challenge. But yeah, doing comprehensive financial planning. And so obviously a different world. We hear advisors talk about shooting for 100 clients, and here you are talking about, 1,000 would be successful.
Right.
So you're at Northwestern Mutual. You're obviously successful. You've got a boatload of clients. Why the discontent? What made you want to make a transition at that point?
It kind of slowly creeped up on me. I always wanted to go the financial planning route. The more I realized how the industry worked, the more I wanted to go that route. And I just thought I was in the best model for that because I looked at the alternatives, and the alternatives were go to a wirehouse or a bank or another insurance company. And I felt good about where I was at in relation to those things. So, it was not like an overnight thing. It was a slow progression to where I was I felt okay where I was at, but I was if there was a better option I could find for financial planning, I would jump all over it. It took me a while to realize that there were better options for it. And part of it was reading Kitsy's. I started reading his stuff, 3 years ago or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of got out of my bubble and realized that there was stuff outside of the wirehouse and insurance company world. And the more I learned about it, it just slowly started to creep up on me that I was maybe not in the best model possible for doing what I wanted to do.
Makes sense. And it sounds like you really wanted to do financial planning. That sounds like that's the passion that really drove you ultimately.
I just wanted to help my clients do the best they possibly could do with their money. And whatever you want to call it, everybody has different titles
Sure.
for our business. But my goal was to help my clients do the best they possibly could do with their money and ultimately their life. Because it all interrelates.
So did you have kind of a typical client profile when you were at Northwestern Mutual, or was it kind of just a super wide range?
It was random at first, and it slowly became more niche or niche.
Yeah, I don't know how to say that word either. I say niche, and some other guests will say niche because it sounds nicer. Niche is aggressive.
I usually just alternate back and forth.
Appease both groups.
So I slowly got towards more the direction of niche, and the niche I was working in was young physicians.
So how did you discover that? Are you married to a physician, got a family member that's a physician, or just kind of start working with a bunch of physicians?
No, it was mainly because I needed to sell stuff to make money at Northwestern Mutual. And I didn't really sell a lot of whole life and stuff like that, like permanent life insurance. So disability insurance was something I kind of gravitated towards. I enjoyed digging into contracts and stuff like that. And so the best market to work with people and sell disability insurance was young physicians. And
Sure.
so ultimately that was how I started it. And after working in it for a while, I started to actually enjoy the people I was hooking up with.
Okay. So just kind of fell into that was kind of the expertise and area. So let's just talk about the transition. I mean, so if folks want to see the actual timeline of the details, they can check out the Kitsis blog post in the show notes. I mean, what does it look like to transition from, an insurance company to an RIA world? I mean, it just seems like a big undertaking.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely a big transition. But I think going into it, I kind of downplayed it. I don't know. I had made up my mind I was going to make the transition and I wasn't worried about it. It was, to me, I was just like, it doesn't matter how big it's going to be. I'm just going to knock it out and get it done. But it was definitely a big undertaking. I probably sped through it a little too quick. I probably could have been a little bit more strategic with it and probably wouldn't have. It was a bigger change than I anticipated. I thought I had a financial planning business before, and I thought I would just be able to kind of explain the differences to clients and then they would stay with me. But it wasn't that simple.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So in your post, you mentioned that, you started out kind of just doing a price comparison, but obviously that's not the best sales pitch. So, I mean, how did you sell this to clients? I mean, what do you tell someone that's been, buying stuff from you on commission and kind of all the fees are wrapped up and don't really know what they're paying? How do you talk them into paying you a planning fee?
Yeah, I mean, at first I was just like, okay, here's what I was doing before and here's what I'm doing, what I'm going to be doing, and just kind of compared the two of them. And it always gravitated towards costs. Like, what am I paying now versus what am I going to pay you going forward and why? And that's what I saw that happening early on. I was like, I was doing it so quick that it took me probably 10 or 15 conversations to realize that every conversation went that direction. And that was not a good place to be in. And once I realized that was happening, I stopped and I said, okay, well, what am I really doing? What I realized is it was a different business. It wasn't able to be apples to apples. Like, you couldn't just say, okay, let's line them up and compare them. It was, what I was doing was different. So I went back into conversations after I realized that and tried to help them understand more of what financial planning really is and clarify that first. And then really kind of go back to what their intentions were for working with me in the first place, because maybe they just wanted to work with me for transactions,
Yeah. And if so, then they wouldn't be a good fit for the new firm.
Right. And you just cross that off. And maybe they're better off sticking with Northwestern because, I think that there's still a big chunk of people that, just want to work with somebody for transactions. So I kind of revamped my strategy midway through, and that worked a ton better. I guess I was trying to strong arm my clients through the process. And, I knew it. People aren't always on the same page as you, and maybe they haven't even told you what their true feelings are about you. Maybe they're not as happy with you as you think they are.
Very true.
And so there was a lot of people I thought were good planning clients, I would call them, but in reality were not a good fit. It was kind of a eye-opening experience, but I slowly learned how to, identify who was who.
So it sounds like price was a big obstacle at first. So what were the other kind of common, objections you were hearing from your clients that you were actually able to overcome?
Price was pretty much the objection. I didn't really have a lot of other objections because it was like, if I was to go through my process and explain, I'm going to be a financial planner now, I'm going to be a fiduciary, I'm going to work on your side of the table, I'm going to do more comprehensive stuff, and it's going to cost the same, I think everybody would have just stayed, or maybe not everybody, but a lot more would have stayed. So it was almost pretty much price was the main thing, or the only thing I was running into. Not a lot of people really cared about whether or not I could service disability and stuff like that.
That's so interesting. When I was going to sell my firm a few months ago, I talked to Carl Richards, who had gone through the same process before me, a couple of years. And he said, one of the things to remember is clients aren't going to cry when you sell your firm.
Yeah.
And I thought about that. And of course I was like, no, they're going to be so upset that I'm doing this. And like, this is a big deal. And my clients were like, oh, this was great. Thanks so much for, working with us over the couple of years. Like, sounds like our new advisor will be great. I'm like, oh, and I say that to say like, ultimately, I'm not sure that we always realize why clients hang out with us.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. Early on, it reminds me of a couple of people I talked to early on that it wasn't like they totally punched me in the face, but I felt like I got punched in the face because I'd worked with them for like 7 or 8 years and we were doing all kinds of different stuff. And I thought that they were a great fit. And I explained my 2 businesses and they're like, okay, well, thanks for covering all that. I think we're just going to stay with Northwestern. And it was great working with you and we'll see you later. And I was like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Did that
I have
really
spent days helping you over the last 7 years.
Yeah. So, and I realized quickly, I'm like, most people think their clients think higher of them than they really do.
I agree with that. I think we're very important to our clients' life. I think it's the service that we offer. It's what we do. I don't know that it's as much of us as a person because ultimately, if we can find somebody else that's a decent personality fit that provides the same service at the same price, clients go with.
There is on the other side, there was people I talked to that were like, we're going to stick with you no matter what, and you can't get rid of us. And we would be devastated if you said that we couldn't work with you. There weren't as many as I hoped, but
good little ego check. No, I totally understand. I went through that same thing. So it's a fun realization. So I guess I'm just kind of curious to kind of hone in on what the sales pitch was. So were you basically just explaining, because it sounds like you were trying to do financial planning at Northwestern Mutual. So was the sales pitch mainly just, I'm doing more comprehensive financial planning? I mean, were you really pushing fiduciary and this fee-only model, or was it really just kind of the overall services you were offering?
I would say it was a combination of the fact that I was going to be on their side of the table, essentially, and so working for them in a combination with the fact that I'll be able to do more for them, like services-wise, some of the different ideas I had for how I would add value going forward. So, I mean, in the end, though, it was almost like they had to go on my promise. I mean, I couldn't, it's really difficult to articulate the value add, as you well know, in financial planning. And ultimately, they have to buy into your big dream of what you're going to offer. And I essentially had to just sell people on the fact that it's going to be better. I'm confident it's going to be a better way of delivering this service if I'm on your side of the table. And I'm going to be able to focus so much more on you, 25 clients instead of 350. And I mean, that just makes sense to me. And I feel like it's the best move in my gut. And if you don't feel like it's good for you, then that's fine. But I really just hit on the big picture. I tried to focus on the big picture because I didn't do well when I got into the weeds.
Okay, that makes sense. So what did this look like in terms of communicating with Northwestern Mutual? Were you having these conversations and hadn't told them yet? Did they know you were making this transition?
I told Northwestern early as I could in the process. I told them like 2 months before I left because I wanted to have a smooth transition for my clients. I didn't want to just leave overnight, and I didn't feel like that was good for anybody if I could avoid it. And so I told them 2 months before I left. I didn't have conversations with my clients until like the day I left. So that's why I was so crazy. Is like I started my business like November 3rd, I guess, last year. And it's like I got to talk to 125 people and have this conversation about the differences in the models and get commitments in as quickly as possible. And it was just,
wow.
I don't know. I wouldn't do it that way if I did it over again.
I mean, what could you have done differently in that instance?
I think I was trying to strong arm everybody through it, I think. I mean, I would have pumped the brakes a little. I would have been like, they can always come back later. They don't all have to transition instantly. And I probably would have charged up front. That's one thing I wish I would have done is I wish I would have, like I have a flat monthly fee, but like I wish I would have done an upfront fee because that would have helped. The front end workload is bigger and that would have helped with the cash flow transition and the time commitment and all that. And that would have been, I wouldn't have been so freaked out about transitioning everybody so quickly. I would have been like, I would have set a limit on how many I could take a month. I would have said, maybe I'm just going to take 20 to start out and I'm only going to take 7 per month until I get to the number I need to get to.
No, that's a really good idea. So you basically just opened up the floodgates and said, everybody come on.
I was like, I'm going to get as many as I can get, quick as I can get. And that was not smart.
So you had a very busy Christmas.
It was crazy. It was, yeah.
And how long was it crazy for? I mean, how long did it take you to really get to where you felt like you'd get your head above water?
It just started slowing down.
Oh my goodness. It's almost a year later.
I mean, it took, because I got backlogged with work. You know, I had to, a lot of my clients weren't as responsive as they needed to be. We're just getting through all of the financial plans with all the, like my last initial client, the transition, we're doing their financial plan this month. So I'm
10 months later. Yeah, no, that's, it's part of it. I mean, and clients can certainly not be responsive. It is one of the reasons I advocate for an upfront fee, because I have found that even just charging $500 or $1,000 up front really gets buy-in from the clients, and they want to get that value. So they tend to get stuff back to you a little faster. If you just go with monthly, sometimes it can be a struggle.
Yes.
So let's talk about your fee structure, because you went from, servicing on a commission basis to a fee only basis. So what does your fee structure look like today?
I will charge people either hourly or a flat monthly fee for financial planning. I don't really take investment management only clients or initial investment management clients. Like if somebody calls and says, can you manage my portfolio? I will typically say, no, we'll give them a recommendation to somebody or whatever. Mm. So hourly or flat fee, the hourly is pretty straightforward. We just outline the project and keep track of our hours. I actually have been happy because I went back and forth on whether or not I was going to do that. And I'm glad that I did it, just because even though I've been crazy, there's been times where I have a few days that are slow, and the hourly people, you can kind of work into the holes. And also for the people that just kind of want a checkup or want a small project, they've worked well in the hourly model. So
makes sense.
The other type is just a flat fee. And like I was saying, I wish I had charged an upfront fee in addition to the flat monthly fee. But we're still currently just doing a flat fee that starts at whatever the monthly rate is that we set from the beginning. Within the next, like my intent early on was to start charging the upfront fee as soon as I got through all of my transition clients, which is supposed to happen this month, like I was saying with that last client. And so right now, though, I don't charge upfront, and it's just a range of between $100 and $400 a month is the highest that I have based on their circumstances.
What are you expecting in terms of upfront fee? Do you have a range in mind?
I'm thinking $500 to $1,500.
Okay. So are you also charging an AUM fee? Or are you managing investments at all?
I am managing investments. And that currently that is, it's like 1% for under, I think 100 or 500,000, and it goes down. I was just telling Jen, who works with me, there's a pretty good chance that will go down.
In terms of the percentage?
In terms of either how much we charge or the break points on when it goes down. I just feel like it's going to go down.
That makes sense. What are you doing for your custodian, or are you using a TAMP?
I use a custodian. I use SSG and then DFA and Vanguard for funds.
Okay. So it's going to look like $500 to $1,500 up front, and then $100 to $400 a month, plus some sort of AUM fee. Not quite sure what that's going to look like yet.
Yeah, the AUM fee is up in the air a little bit.
I mean, so where are you at? I mean, so you made this transition last November, so you're coming up on a year. You had 350 clients. You certainly didn't want to bring all those with you anyway. So where's your practice at in terms of number of clients and just kind of overall gross revenue at this point?
As far as clients, I have 71 clients. So the way that I keep up with the revenue, I have like an annualized revenue that I look at. So if you annualized our revenue, as of now, it's 168,000. That's as of August 1st, actually. So,
dude, that's awesome.
So that's, I guess, compared to my Northwestern business, it's still considerably lower.
Sure.
And I have probably higher expenses than most young fee-only guys that I know, at least especially the people I've talked with in XY Planning is like I have an office, I have a full-time staff person. So, well,
you also had to do 70 plus plans in 10 months.
Yeah, I didn't feel like I was getting paid I felt like I was earning like $20 an hour for my time
Understood.
for a while there, just because I was cranking and not charging up front. But
yeah, I mean, and if you look back, I mean, not to rub it in or anything, but I mean, if we look back, if you had charged that $1,000 up front, I mean, there's another $70,000 in revenue. You may have lost a client or two over doing that, but it probably would have made you feel a little better about all the plans you were writing.
My guess is that I would have probably gotten maybe 75% of my clients that I actually got. And the 25% I didn't get would have probably been people that I shouldn't have gotten anyway.
That's fair.
And, I don't know.
Okay. No, I mean, so sounds like, I mean, for being less than a year in business, I mean, I was saying on a previous episode that I think I made $42,000 gross in my first 12 months in business. So I was a quarter of what you had, but I also started from scratch, whereas you were able to transition these clients over, which meant my time was spent marketing. Your time, I mean, you've probably had barely any time to actually market because you had 71 clients to get started with.
Yeah, I mean, we still don't have much time to market. I mean, I haven't really gotten out much proactively.
So let's talk about your niche market a little bit. I mean, I was taking a look at your website, which is awesome. So anybody that wants to check it out, it's just Wrenne, is it WrenneFinancial.com?
Yes.
Okay. WrenneFinancial.com. We'll put a link in the show notes. Just have an awesome, just the design of it is, I love it. It's definitely my style.
I didn't design it, by the way. It was not mine.
Yeah, you can give your firm a shout out for sure.
Yeah, I used Harrison Ward, and they are a local firm.
Yeah, and I saw their link was at the bottom of your website. So if anybody's out there looking for a fantastic website builder, just go check that out. So let's talk about your niche market a little bit. Your website obviously speaks to that niche. Are you still working with physicians? Is that still your primary focus?
Yes, that's what I'm focused on, and any marketing I do is geared around that.
So what type of efforts have you started to put into place? I mean, it sounds like obviously you really haven't needed to market. And so kind of what are you expecting going forward in terms of targeting that niche?
I've started to do some speaking. I did speaking at Northwestern a lot with different residency programs. Like I speak to the medical school once a year, like the University of Kentucky Medical School. Mm-hmm. So speaking is definitely a big thing that I'm going to focus more on as I free up some time. I have a blog that I mostly write geared towards that specific niche. I mean, they have some unique stuff that I can focus in on, and like student loans is the easiest one. We spend a lot of time putting out stuff related to student loans, and that's kind of nice because I can use that to send, an article to a center of influence that can, send it to a prospective client that might benefit from that idea or whatever. So the two biggest things are the blogging and the speaking at this point. I have a lot of different ideas going forward that I would like to try out, but I haven't yet gotten into.
One of the things I forgot to ask you that I want to go back, and you mentioned this in your Kitsis article, was you did kind of a focus group of kind of your ideal clients around, what services they were looking for. And I remember you saying that was part of the reason why you ended up going the RIA route. Would you just talk a little bit about that and just how that all came together and what you learned?
Yeah, so it was actually, none of them were clients. They were all what I would consider like very successful physician business owners. So like guys that ran practices in town that I knew and trusted, and they were more of like mentor kind of types. And so I had conversations with maybe 5 or 6 of them. This was actually before I had for certain decided, like you said, that I'm going to leave. And so the questions I asked were around like, what are their expectations or what are their feelings about the industry of financial services, and what are the good things and the bad things? And if in an ideal world, what would they like to see? What are the services and stuff like that? And so that was one of the big things that kind of put a bad taste in my mouth in regards to where I was at, is that they basically said that they thought the entire financial services industry was a bunch of salespeople, and that they ran most of their ideas by their CPA or their attorney that they get from any financial services people that they work with, whether it be an investment person. It worked pretty well because they weren't clients, so they didn't feel like they had to hold back, I guess.
Yeah. That's big, though, to be running, financial planning stuff by a CPA or an attorney who probably have little to no training in half the things that you're recommending.
Yeah, and they were very direct. They were like, I always run everything by. I was just like, holy moly, I hope that's not happening to my clients. But they shared some bad experiences that they had. They're like, one of the things they said was that they think that most advisors push products and that they let some stuff slip through the cracks, like budgeting and 529s and, debt, for instance. And
I mean, I can't say I blame them for that. I mean, perception, because that's what most people that call themselves financial advisors do. I mean, why work with your client on budgeting? You don't make any money.
And the one thing one of them said was like, ideal arrangement would be working with an advisor and like a fee for service arrangement. They were like, but that doesn't exist, so I'm not going to do it. So I was like, well, I may. But that was essentially, they were saying we want to work with somebody that's like fee only so that we could get rid of some of these conflicts.
That's so awesome. So I'm curious if any of those folks became clients or have they just kind of remained mentors?
They've remained mentors that I haven't really done a lot with. I mean, I haven't like gone back to them and tried to push anything. I guess one of them, I've kind of shown him my website and gotten some feedback on different things, but I guess of all of them, none of them have become clients.
Okay.
But
I asked that because back in episode 11, Michael and I did kind of just talked about niche marketing. And this was one of his recommendations was take members of your niche out, just like you did, kind of focus group them and then build the firm that they're looking for. His encouragement was hopefully those people do become clients, but it sounds like you haven't really pressed it to see if they're really interested.
I think if I had conversations with all of them, that at least a couple of them would become clients, but I haven't yet gotten to the point where I'm able to be proactive about drumming up business.
Yeah, I mean, you haven't needed to. So it's one of those things that, well, maybe you have to check back with you in a year or so and see, just hear about the new marketing efforts and things like that, just kind of see how it's growing. You mentioned specifically student loans. Do you have any recommended courses or education, or did you just kind of go out and learn student loan stuff all on your own?
I've gone kind of the old school route of learning it on your own, but I have connected with some people since I started my business that I probably would have benefited from following before. Well, the main one is Jan Miller. Have you ever heard of Jan?
I have not.
Jan Miller I think he's the number one Google for student loan consultant. Let me check. So I hooked up with him on Twitter, and he is basically all he does is charge his clients to provide student loan consulting. That's all he does.
So are his clients typically advisors or consumers directly?
Consumers. He works mainly with consumers, but he's got a pretty good blog, and he was really generous with his time, and I've been able to, hook up with him, and I've sent him some referrals and whatnot, but he knows student loans better than anybody I've been able to find, and he doesn't sell stuff.
Cool. No, that's awesome. So we'll definitely link to him in the show notes, and I'll put in a plug for Heather Jarvis just because I know her. She's more on the training advisor. She doesn't do direct consumer facing work. So depending on what you're looking for, if you're looking for someone to do the work, this guy sounds like he'd be a good fit. If you're looking to get some education, I know Heather has some courses that you can go through. I have not done one myself, but I've heard good things. So there's not a lot of expertise out there. I mean, I'm a big believer that kind of student loans are this generation's version of Social Security, and the complexities. I remember we always used to say like, oh yeah, just go out and charge $500 for a Social Security analysis to kind of let people test drive your service. If you do a $500 student loan analysis for young clients and showcase your expertise, man, talk about a hook to get them in the door.
I mean, that's one of my ideas for, going forward marketing wise, is to have some sort of small entry-level service for the residents, fellows, or medical students. And student loans is, top of the list right now. And I agree with everything you said.
Makes sense. No, and we actually had Matt Becker on the episode before this, so episode 13. He's kind of, I would say, one step in front of you in terms of developing some of those resources. So it ties in well with that. We see just so many advisors in this position of, okay, I've got the big financial planning service and I've kind of got the leads that are out there, but what can I do between free and really expensive? What's the service in between there? And Kitsis calls it getting paid to market, because you're essentially clients are paying you to show them what you do, so they will then buy from you.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
I've tried doing a resident pack. Like I started out where I was going to charge residents or fellows like $50 a month. And that's just to do their fundamental financial planning. That hasn't worked as well as I had anticipated because, well, for starters, most of them ultimately we focus on the student loan anyway. And the other thing is that sometimes they're more comprehensive than a $50 a month. I mean, sometimes it ends up being one of my more complex clients and $50 a month just doesn't work. And so I kind of left it pretty open in regards to what we provided. So that's out for now. But the intent was to kind of do something like that. It just didn't work.
Sure. No, we can slip into business coaching mode on the radio. I love the idea of doing like some type of, a package. I'm not a big fan of hourly kind of open-ended, like, we'll kind of figure out what works for you. Like I love being able to sell for $500. You will get a student loan payoff plan, or whatever. Because honestly, most of them look alike. If you're working with physicians, they're going to be, higher than average income earner. They're probably not going to qualify for a lot of the programs, but they'll qualify for some of them. So like what you deliver ends up getting very templated. It's kind of the same thing over and over with a few different numbers. And suddenly, as you streamline it, then your assistant or your staff member can be kind of inputting the data and all of that. And you kind of do a once over. So it turns, maybe you only actually have to work for 30 minutes to an hour to actually produce a really high value, service to your clients, and you're getting paid $500 for it or whatnot. And I bet that's something that doctors would pay for because we're all terrified of student loans.
There was a company that no longer exists called GL Advisor. Or Graduate Leverage Advisor is what it stood for, I think. But they were doing exactly what you just described for, I think, $400.
Okay.
Except they were selling financial services, everything in financial services, like all the insurances, fee-based, everything you can think of on the back end. And they got into a little trouble, but for other areas. But they built a massive clientele of people around the country just off of the student loan thing. They just screwed up the other stuff. But
well, don't you love it? You can learn from other people's mistakes and just kind of take what was working. Because we see this working more and more, and yet advisors tend to not adopt kind of these smaller packages. But again, if it eliminates, and Matt Becker said this, and I thought it was a really interesting thought. He said, if it eliminates my having to do an intro call about services that I do for free, and I essentially get paid to do an intro instead, and I'm giving them value, why wouldn't I do that?
Right.
And I think that's so true. So,
yeah.
So circling back, I know we probably have listeners, who knows how many, that are actually working for Northwestern Mutual, or they're just an insurance company in general, maybe the wirehouses. What do you want to tell them? I mean, what would be helpful for them to know if they're kind of out there looking and they kind of are just discovering this thing that we call financial planning, and that it's not just sales? I mean, what if anything would you want them to know?
I think I would just say that there's other stuff out there that to take a look at it. And the key is to be open-minded and think from the standpoint of what's best for your clients. And so, because there's a lot of really good people at Northwestern Mutual that are financial planning focused, a whole lot. And it's growing because that's the direction they're going. And I think it's just a good exercise every once in a while, even if you stay, to just say, okay, where am I at? What else is out there? And be open-minded about it. Don't be so closed and, one-dimensional about it. Be open-minded and give everything else a chance. And then worst case scenario, you're just reassured that you're in a great place. But it took me longer than I would have hoped to do that. I was not as good about that.
Fair enough. So I guess as we kind of wrap up, I always like to ask guests this question. So, and we can either go back to when you were just about to start at Northwestern Mutual, or maybe even when you were about to start your firm. I mean, you've touched on a few things, so we'll see if you got anything else for us. But what is one thing that you wish you had known? I mean, if you could go back and tell yourself one thing, what do you think that would be?
It's a good question. I would go back to my 22-year-old self starting at Northwestern and say, you don't know everything. Because starting out, I thought I knew way more than I really did. And it was just dangerous almost. And I think a lot of people, maybe that's just an age thing too, but I think it would have helped to have somebody 10 years further down the road to knock you in the head and be like, listen, you don't know everything. Be grounded, and really you don't know anything.
For those of us that are belligerent, hard-headed folks, and I'll put myself in this boat, it's hard to recognize that. I mean, it really is. And it's hard to be open. But I think ultimately it's hard to grow if you think you know everything, and it's not just about learning just information. It's also just about growing as a person and growing and understanding that just the basics, the way things have always been done aren't necessarily the way they've got to continue to be done. And you're a testament to the fact that, you can go from old school to new school pretty quickly and get a successful practice up and running if that's something that you really want to do.
But I was very hard-headed at that point in my life, and I wouldn't have been open to much. So
understood. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time to be on today. You just have such an inspiring story about making the leap and the transition. I know there's so much technical side of this that most of us don't know, especially for me who never had to make the transition. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
What an incredibly valuable interview. I love Daniel. We finally got the opportunity to hang out at XYPN 15. He is just such an awesome guy. So I'm really thrilled that we were able to get him on the show and share his story. His just had some really awesome insights. So, as you heard, if you're in a position similar to where Daniel was just a year or two ago, I really hope his story, shows you that you can build a business to support your great life. And just because you're building a business at an insurance company or wirehouse doesn't mean you have to stay there forever. Now, you can find the show notes and all the resources that we talked about on the episode at www.xyplanningnetwork.com/14. Now, just as a reminder, if you want to ask our guest questions at any time or submit questions for Michael Kitsis and I to answer during our once a month mailbag episodes, sign up for our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. or text XYPN radio to 33444 to get access. This month's shows are brought to you by Betterment Institutional, a leading technology platform helping advisors scale their practice, improve their client experience, and save time. Betterment teamed up with industry veterans to build a next-generation interface for clients, automating workflows to allow advisors to spend more time with their clients. You can meet their practice management team dedicated to working with you to integrate a digital strategy into your business, providing best practices on technology adoption and integration. Check them out at bettermentinstitutional.com, and also be sure to listen to episode 16 at xyplanningnetwork.com/16 to hear an in-depth interview with Betterment Institutional partner Steve Lokshin. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.